It's a big game coming up this Monday night for the Denver Broncos, but is it a must-win? I'll tell you why there's a big set of numbers that shows that it is on this edition of Orange and Blue Today. Orange and Blue Today brought to you by our friends over at Ramos Law, diving into whether you can call this a must-win for the Denver Broncos. Andrew Mason here, Cecil Lammy on assignment today on this Friday, which when you've got a Monday night game, it's a football Thursday. So practice was a full pad day for the Denver Broncos as they went through their paces, and Saturday will be a football Friday, so we'll be back out there at Broncos HQ, and we'll get the final injury report on Saturday as they lead into the Monday Night Football game against the Cincinnati Bengals. But there's certainly a sense of urgency around the Denver Broncos, but it's also the big question: is it a must-win for the Denver Broncos in this game? Is there such thing as a must-win early on in the season? And there's probably a number in this, and there's a stat in this that shows why it is a must-win. But first, let's just take a listen around the locker room, and let's actually start with J.K. Dobbins, the Broncos' leading rusher, the man who had, of course, a touchdown run on a play that was more like a pass last week, but because it went backwards from Bo Nix, it goes into the books as a run, and of course had the 41-yard run preceding that. He talks about whether this game is a must-win or not.
Like must win?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, all of them must win, you know. That's how I see it. But, yeah, it's must win. You know, the Bengals are a good team, good defense, you know, playmakers on offense, so it's not going to be easy. But we got to go in there and we got to figure out a way how to win.
Yeah, I sort of a little bit of tap dancing, but yes, must win, must win. He did say that. It's also fair to say that it's the next one on the schedule, and that's something that Adam Troutman said when the notion came up. Although he did not get directly asked about whether it was a must-win, the way it was brought up to him was in the frame of it being a big game because it's Monday Night Football. It's in prime time. It's the spotlight on the Denver Broncos for the first time this season. So he offered the notion up on his own.
I think it brings a little more excitement maybe, but also we need to win. So you don't really always want to say must win, but I think we need to win this game. And that's why this game's more important. It's the next game, so it's the most important.
He was kind of saying it without saying it. Sometimes Adam Troutman does that. He sort of says the thing without completely saying it, but you know what he means by that. And certainly, I think that sort of dials into the sense of urgency that's been around the Denver Broncos this week, that you hear about the race to get better. Sean Payton talks about that all the time, that you're in a race to get better in the first 4 games of the season. Well, here we are. We're at the end of that first 4 games. Even though it's a 17-game schedule, it's still kind of the first quarter of the year. And now you're at a point where the team starts to become the fully formed version of itself. The first couple of games, you're going to see the outlier type of results, the unusual type of outcomes. I mean, you look back last year, for example, at the New Orleans Saints mowing down opponents in those first couple of games, and that's the sort of thing that proved to not be sustainable. But now you get to week 3, week 4. This is where the teams start to more closely resemble what you're going to see the rest of the way. Doesn't mean they're going to stay that way. They're not going to keep evolving, but this is more closer to the finished product, the finished form. And then from there, it's just evolution, tweaks, that sort of thing going forward. So here you are, and in terms of the race to get better, you're not in bad shape at 1-2. At least you're not 0-3. If you were 0-3, then I think you'd be in pretty dire straits. Certainly, I think that would be reason to mash the panic button if you were 0-3. I think in Houston, for example, even though they've lost close games, they lost a close game early to the Rams, they lost right there in the final seconds to Tampa Bay, and they lost a close one to Jacksonville. I think it's probably fair to have some sense of panic down there in Houston, especially because in that division, the Colts look so much better than the Texans do, and it looks like it's sailing away from them compared to what their expectations were. I don't think there's really much cause for panic. I think there are some things that are cause for concern. I think the mistakes are cause for concern. And that's one thing that you've heard a lot of in the last couple of days from on both sides of the ball. Mental mistakes. Mistakes that are within your own grasp. Pre-snap penalties over and over again. That the things that you can control, offsides, neutral zone infractions, illegal formations, false starts, all these types of things, that's something that is being hammered as a message over and over again. And you know it's being hammered as a message because of how often players are saying it. So clearly, this is something that you do get out of the interview process over the course of a week. When you hear something repeated from players, it's clear that this is the talking point that is being brought in the meeting room. This is what's being drilled into them because it's on all of their minds. Like this is where they want the focus, the coaches want the focus to be this week. Where they want the players' focus to be is on eliminating the self-inflicted wounds, eliminating the mistakes that are within their purview. There are going to be things that happen in the run of play that they're going to happen. But taking care of the things that kind of are pre-snap, that are mental mistakes, that's more the concern. And I think one answer that really illuminated that and kind of how they're focusing more on those things than kind of the aggression type of penalties. It was the response that Vance Joseph had to a question I asked today, because he was talking about all the penalties. And so one of the penalties I asked him about, was Talanoa Hufanga's unnecessary roughness penalty, because of course it was a costly penalty, but at the same time, it's a penalty out of aggression. So is that something that you are concerned about? Because you obviously want to cut penalties, but you don't want to curb the natural aggression, instincts, and attacking of your players. You don't want to do anything to throttle that back. You want to maintain said intensity. And so I think the response that VJ gave here, I thought was pretty illuminating in that regard. So let's hear from Vance Joseph and the reply he had to my question about that.
Of course. Absolutely. I think it's two kind of penalties. It's penalties that's pre-snap that we don't want ever, okay? And it's aggressive penalties that we can accept from time to time, but when they hurt you, you can't separate them, because it's costing us games right now. So we can't separate those. So we have to, in those moments, play clean football. If they call them, we have to correct them. We have to deal with it, right? And I think, with Huff's penalty, that penalty came from Patrick's first tackle. He drove the guy back 6 yards, and the whistle wasn't blown. The guy runs and, gains 30 more yards. So he finished the guy. So, that's what had happened. But again, if they call it, we have to correct it. We have to acknowledge it, and we have to move on past it.
So that's it. That's interesting. I think that's very logical, is that Hafanga's being more aggressive. He's going maybe a little bit past the whistle or to that because of what happened earlier with Surtain not finishing the play on Quentin Johnston. And something that Vance Joseph said later on is like he's using that as a reminder to everybody that you have to finish. You have to play to the whistle. And you can't let up. That ended up being, unfortunately, it was a costly play, but it did turn into a teachable moment as a reminder to everybody to play to the whistle and finish. I mean, look, as we saw, it can happen to the best of players. It happened to Pat Surtain last Sunday that he didn't finish, he didn't bring down Quentin Johnston, and he got free. Those of you who have been Broncos fans for 20 plus years, maybe you recall the playoff game in Indianapolis back in January of 2004 when you've got a Colts receiver down and a couple of Broncos defenders, including the great Al Wilson, and they're standing there arguing and nobody tags him down. And then the receiver takes off and scores a touchdown in one of those two Colts wild card romps over the Broncos. This is the point. It can happen to great players, that little thing of falling asleep. Or another example, when Michael Clayton of the Bucks early in the 2004 season, John Lynch comes over and he tags Clayton, but Clayton is like, his knee is off the ground. Lynch is afraid of a hit that he's going to get, for which he's going to get fined, and because Clayton's knee is off the ground and not on the ground, the tag isn't enough, and Clayton gets up and scores a touchdown for Tampa Bay. Just all these things, like, it's that fine line, and I think also it's also a reminder that sort of, the issue of kind of walking that line of hitting too hard. It's not something that simply is a recent thing. It's the kind of battle that's been fought for a couple of decades in terms of wondering where is that line. But you've got to finish. So it's very interesting kind of what the Broncos are dealing with. The other thing that's coming from Vance Joseph is to his players is being exact. That's something that Nick Bonito pointed out on Thursday that is a huge part of his message, and it goes to a lot of stuff pre-snap, is being exact, getting your details right, not getting caught offside, not having these pre-snap penalties. So this one thing they think is that if they get these details right, they're going to see better results. Now, this should help. I don't think it will fix everything, in part because, for example, we've talked about the issues at inside linebacker until you get Dre Greenlaw back. Justin Sternad and Alex Singleton right now, unfortunately, as a duo, are among the bottom inside linebacker duos, among 3-4 inside linebacker duos in the NFL. The analytics bear that out, both against the run and in pass coverage. Next Gen Stats has them as a pair of linebackers in coverage, both of whom are allowing opposing quarterbacks to have a rating of 110 plus against them. There's only one other team with two linebackers playing a decent amount of coverage snaps with 110 plus ratings against two linebackers. That's the Miami Dolphins. So it's one of those things where what you see on the film, what you see with your eyes, the numbers back it up. And when the film reveals it and the numbers reveal it, when it's crossing over on that, you've got some problems. So I think getting the details right can help to a degree, but I don't know that it's going to get the Broncos all the way there to where you want this defense to be. You can get it hopefully back to a better level than it's been the last 2 weeks, because the last 2 weeks we've talked about this defense being one that against the Colts allowed 450 plus again, like they did against the Bengals last year, the Browns last year, the Bills in the playoffs last year, and then last week gave up 29 first downs. They've only given up more first downs than that 10 times in team history. Before we dive into another reason why this is a must-win and how this ties into Sean Payton's history, let's hear from our friends over at Ramos Law.
Today's episode of Orange and Blue Today is presented by Ramos Law, the official injury law firm partner of the Denver Broncos. Ramos Law was founded by Dr. Joseph Ramos, an attorney and ER doctor, to provide exceptional care to those injured in accidents. With a unique understanding of both medicine and law, the Ramos Law team is built to fight for you every step of the way. Experience the Ramos Law difference. Contact them today at ramoslaw.com.
Welcome back. So going to dive into the numbers here. And there's an interesting data point in Sean Payton's history that shows why this game is a must-win. So it also explains why Sean Payton talks about the race to get better so often. So Sean Payton, of course, he had 15 seasons in New Orleans and now 2 previous seasons here. So he's had 17 seasons. He's had 5 losing seasons. Okay, so 07, his second season with the Saints. The 3 consecutive losing seasons in 14, 15, and 16, all of them were 7-9. And then, of course, going 8-9 with the Broncos in his first year here in 2023. Okay. What all those 5 seasons have in common is that these are the only 5 times in his career when in the first 4 games his teams have been below 500. All 5 of those years, 1-3 or worse in the first 4 games. And always those teams finish with losing records. Every other year of his career, 500 or better, and every other year, at least 2-2 in the first 4 games. So no Sean Payton team has ever dug out of a losing record in the first 4 games to finish even 500. So his teams, we've seen the last couple of years, of course, 1-3 in the opening 4 games of 2023. 0-2 last year, but then recovered to get to 2-2. Nice little assist from Greg the Leg Zuerlein missing in the rain in the Broncos-Jets game at Week 4 to allow the Broncos to escape after Will Lutz had that miss just a few moments earlier in that game. But that's an interesting bottom line thing on Sean Payton's history. And I think explains some of the way he talks about the early part of the season with some urgency and about a race to get better. Because while his teams have generally found their stride at some point at midseason, they haven't been able to complete the dig out of the bad start. I mean, 2023 is a terrific example because that team did run off 5 wins in a row to get to 6-5, but then could not complete the trick. Lost to Houston, beat the Chargers, then lost to Detroit, and then came home and lost to New England on Christmas Eve. Could not complete the comeback in full. And it's sort of like you see sometimes in games, a team comes storming back from a hole it dug from itself, but then just doesn't have quite enough to complete that rally and get all the way back. You put so much into the comeback that maybe you don't quite have enough juice to get over the top. So it's something to consider. The history of Sean Payton's career tells you that this game is a must-win for the Broncos because the history of Sean Payton has shown that his teams have never come back from 1-3 to finish over 500. That is something very, very interesting in this. So Anyway, Denver, I almost said Denver football after dark. Sorry, because my little habit. Orange and Blue today, brought to you by our friends over at Ramos Law. I'm flying solo today. Cecil Lammy is on assignment. He'll be back with me on Sunday, so I will be flying solo again on Saturday. And yes, there will be a Saturday show roughly about 5 p.m. I'm not. It isn't quite set in stone, but it'll be probably a very quick show, kind of recapping where things stand coming out of Friday injury news, if any injury news, that sort of thing. Just kind of resetting things heading into the weekend, and then Cecil Lammy and I will have a game preview show for you on Sunday. We are, and programming note, we will be on live after the late afternoon games end on Sunday and before Sunday Night Football. So we'll take you into Sunday Night Football and come out of the big game. The very interesting Ravens-Chiefs game, by the way, because somebody's going to be 1-3. Some team that fancies themselves a Super Bowl contender is going to be sitting at that 1-3 mark that we mentioned is kind of a danger zone for the Broncos if they fall to that mark. That's something very, very interesting to consider in terms of how the AFC playoff race is going to be shaking up. That Baltimore, Kansas City is going to be in a hole by the time the Broncos take the field on Monday night. It'll be fascinating to see actually where the standings end up shaking out by the time Sunday's play is on and where the Broncos kind of end up factoring. I mean, I don't think they're going to get the help of the Giants with Jackson Dart making his debut, giving the Broncos a solid and upsetting the Chargers. But perhaps they could get some other help elsewhere in this game. So anyway, interesting stuff in the chat, and plenty of stuff on Bo Nix, of course. Everything Bo is going to be a discussion point until he fully gets back on track. I think I just wanted to take a little bit of a break today from all that and discuss something other than Bo and where things stand for him, especially because we didn't hear from Sean Payton or Bo Nix today. It was fair to talk about something different, like all the other things that are askew, the penalties, the little mishaps on the defensive side, because it's taking a village of miscues to put the Broncos at 1-2. There are a great many fingerprints on this start to the season. It's not, you can't just point your fingers to quarterback or anything else. I mean, certainly, yes, Bo, to his credit, is owning it, but there are a lot of players who I think can own this as well. And thus, the message from the coaches to the players in meetings this week about focusing on being exact, focusing on details, because each one of them has some detail that they can clean up that's been going wrong. Each one of them has something that they can do right, that they can improve, that they can polish. And if everybody does a little something better, then I don't think there's any reason why they can't turn this 1-2 start into being 5-3 or 6-3. And I think 6-3 is very attainable by the time they get back into division play with those 2 games in November. First, the Raiders on Thursday Night Football, and then the Chiefs after that. The Broncos get the mini bye before the Chiefs game. The Chiefs get a full bye, which obviously you never want to face an Andy Reid team after a full bye, but the Broncos getting a mini bye, I think, helps that a little bit. That's obviously well over the horizon, but but looking at the opponents the Broncos have the next few weeks, and looking just at the fact that even with all these things going wrong, many fingerprints on these 2 losses, the fact that you could correct one or two things from each game despite all the things going wrong. I mean, despite giving up 29 first downs the last game, despite giving up 450 yards plus the previous game, you would only have to change one thing in each game and it could go the other way. That's why I don't think there should be much of a sense of panic. Now, the way the Broncos get to their success this year, assuming they get there, might look a little bit different than perhaps expected because maybe it doesn't involve a top 5D, but that's okay. Perhaps it involves other things being effective. Maybe the running game has shown at least it can be explosive. Perhaps you can start getting more consistency from there. Anyway, Orange and Blue today here for this Friday here, a football Thursday, but a Friday on the calendar. Appreciate all of you joining me for this episode. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Appreciate all the comments, so feel free to drop them in there if you're on YouTube, whether you watch live or you watch on delay. I know plenty of people will be watching this show later on Friday or Saturday, whenever. So appreciate all of you chiming in and joining the conversation, making the show go, and appreciate the subscribers coming in. We've got on the Denver Sports Channel north of 20,000, so I appreciate all of you popping in on that. And before we go, I want to hear from our friends one more time at Ramos Law. So we'll check out and we'll hear from them real quick.
For over 20 years, my family, like so many of you, has proudly been part of Broncos country. Every season, we feel the energy, passion, and commitment that defines this team. And now, we are honored to be the official injury law firm partner of the Denver Broncos. Ramos Law. What makes us different makes us better.
This has been Orange and Blue today for your Friday afternoon here in the Mile High City. Good talking with you as always, and I'll see you on Saturday, the football Friday, but Saturday on the calendar as we continue to count down to the Broncos game against the Cincinnati Bengals. Take care, everyone.